We're about to see a sustained decline of support for mass immigration. Walter Russell Mead, one of my all-time favorite historical and geopolitical commentators, wrote that we might be on the precipice of that in his column for the Wall Street Journal this week. He made the assessment not just based on American anti-immigration sentiment, but also what's happening in Europe, also what's happening in South Africa, in Latin America. Basically, all over the world, we're seeing an anti-immigration sentiment rise. He also points out not only is this a global trend, he also points out the historical trends that are beginning to repeat themselves. For instance, a lot of people talk about how the United States is a melting pot made up of immigrants, which is true. While they lionize the history of Ellis Island, they oftentimes leave out the Johnson-Reed Act, or the Immigration Act of 1924, which placed severe restrictions on immigration really until the 1970s. It took a while for the United States to get there, to pass the Johnson-Reed Act in 1924. Mead points out in his column and on his podcast that anti-immigration sentiment actually kind of started around the 1880s. And the immigration wave began in the 1860s, right after the Civil War. Problems began emerging when immigrants did not assimilate to American culture fast. For instance, where my ancestors immigrated to, Minnesota, at one point there were 14 Norwegian language newspapers circulating in Minneapolis. And the German Lutheran churches continued to teach and preach in German, and they wouldn't really stop doing that until they were forced to during World War I. And so the constant influx of Scandinavians and Germans kind of irritated the Minnesotans who had already been here. And then the labor movement began to turn on immigration. At first, they were for it because the labor movement was largely made up of immigrants. But the labor movement began turning against immigration for two reasons. The first is they realized that the new immigrants were undercutting the people who had been here for a while's wages. Have you heard that argument lately in the US? Then the labor movement began to get uncomfortable with the new immigrant population's progressive politics. Does this sound familiar to you? We're seeing this play out in modern day. Back then, we were worried about communism. Today, it's DSA or socialism. But both of these two are first-generation or second-generation immigrants who also openly detest American culture. I mean, Francesca Hong hates Thanksgiving. And then there's reports that have come out recently that Al Sayed hates fireworks and the 4th of July. But ultimately, the argument Walter Russell Mead kind of ends up making is that Americans tend to be pro-immigration when we feel that we can give immigrants a better life. But when cultures start clashing and we feel that sometimes immigrant populations are making our lives not as great, like, I don't know, the DSA kind of ruining the modern Democratic Party right now, that is when Americans of all political persuasions start entertaining the idea of not allowing people to come over here and give themselves a better life. And maybe, if history repeats itself, we are seeing the beginning stages of this. But I want you to tell me, can you see a world in which there's ever an immigration moratorium in the United States in modern day? Because I'm still not convinced.